In the last few years, it was close to impossible to avoid stumbling upon things like COVID is a vaccine, we are the virus, or we have to reduce human population for our planet to survive, or nature is healing from us. And a lot of these things have strong eco-fascist vibes. So I originally wanted to make a video about eco-fascism, but the script got too long because I got distracted and wrote about Malthusianism instead. So I decided to just split it. The next video will be about eco-fascism. I still don't know when I will upload it, maybe in 2, maybe in 3 or 4 weeks, because I will have college soon, so no upload schedule probably. Anyway, Malthusianism, what is that? Well, it is a theory of population that got introduced in 1798 by the English human Thomas Robert Malthus. It is written in Old English, like not that Old English, but even Old German literature is hard for me to read. But reading Old English texts is pretty exhausting because I have to translate a lot of stuff, have to check if I understood it correctly, send it to friends so I know I am not misunderstanding it, and it is very exhausting. So I have not completely read his essay, which is also pretty long, but I will still directly quote from his source, and I have read large parts of it, and I just hope that this transparency is nothing held against me, because it's just some of us don't have the privilege to speak English as their native language. The title of the essay is the following, and I have to read it out because it's long. On the principle of population as it affects the future improvement of society. To give you an impression about his style and his thesis, I will use direct quotes as well, as I've said. So he begins his essay by establishing 2 theses which are the foundation of the following arguments. I think I may fairly make 2 postulates. First, that food is necessary to the existence of man. Secondly, that the passion between the sexes is necessary and will remain nearly in its present state. Then he continues by explaining why those are right and how those will not change. So he basically forgets about contraception, which even existed in rudimentary forms in the 18th century, from what I know. But what he concludes from these 2 theses is what makes his theory so interesting. So let's give it a listen. Assuming then my postulate is granted, I say that the power of population is indefinitely greater than the power in the earth to produce subsistence for man. Population, when unchecked, increases in a geometrical ratio. Subsistence increases only in an arithmetical ratio. A slight acquaintance with numbers will show the immensity of the first power in comparison to the second. By that law of our nature which makes food necessary to the life of man, the effects of these 2 unequal powers must be kept equal. This implies a strong and constantly operating check on population from the difficulty of subsistence. Thus natural inequality of the 2 powers of population and of production in the earth, and the great law of our nature which must constantly keep their effects equal, from the great difficulty that to me appears insurmountable in the way to the perfectibility of society. I see no way by which man can escape from the weight of this law which pervades all animated nature. No fancied equality, no agrarian regulations in the utmost extent could remove the pressure of it even for a single century. And like my first instinct when I read this was like, go to therapy, man. Because it sounds a lot like when you're totally depressed and you feel totally hopeless and you're just sad and desperate, but you need to find something to rationalize the depression with, and then you come up with some ideas like these. I know, that's the vibe it gave me when I read it at first. The population of the earth is computed to be about 7 million, and we will suppose the present produced equal to the support of such a number. In the first 25 years, the population would be 40 million, and the food being also doubled, the mean of subsistence would be equal to this increase. In the next 25 years, the population would be 28 million, and the means of subsistence only equal to the support of 21 millions. In the next period, the population would be 56 million, and the mean of subsistence just sufficient for half that number. And at that conclusion of the first century, the population would be 112 million, and that means of subsistence only equal to the support of 35 million, which would leave a population of 77 billions totally unprovided for. And although Malthus likes numbers, he apparently doesn't really like language, so this is like the worst paragraph I ever read, and I read a lot. So basically what he's trying to say is that population will grow faster than the food supply. In fact, the population will double every 25 years and the food supply will only And I also know that he stepped down from this 25 years number in his second essay, but if you look up anything about Malthus, you will always stumble upon the 25 figure. And this video is not just made to shit on an old man, but because many liberals nowadays are still using this theory to do stuff with it, and I don't know, hate poor people. I will come back to that later. But Malthus basically says that if we do not install preventive checks on the population, we will end with pestilence, war, famine, and death. Awesome. So yeah, he encourages preventive checks instead, and they are not pretty humane, I think. But I have already said that a lot of liberals pretty much like Malthus, so I have to debunk a theory, because otherwise how can we debunk their arguments? Because they base their arguments on Malthus. So he was not as good at mathematics as he thought he was. And I'm definitely not good at mathematics either. Definitely not. So I decided to do some kind of reality check and start with at the year 0 and calculate until today how the population would have grown if Malthus was right. So, bear with me, it's going to be right. So he said that the population doubles every 25 years. That means that if we take 2000 years from year 0 to now, approximately, we have to divide 2000 through 25. That gives us a number 80. This is the amount of times we will have to double the population. Jesus shared his planet with approximately 300 million other human beings. That means that we have 300 million other human beings, multiply that with 2 to the power of 18, if you want to get the point where we are now. And then I got a number that made me very sad, and I'm going to read it out because it's too long. 3.626777746 E plus 32. And then I was sad because I didn't understand what that meant. But because I am apparently a nice person, I have friends who know mathematics, so I asked one of them, and she explained that you have to move the comma the amount of digits that are written in the end. That would be 32 in this case. Back. So that would mean that we have a number with 33 digits. And I think that would mean a quadrillion, but I am not sure. Because why should I bother with that? It's a high number. And it's much higher than our population is today. To illustrate this, I made a graph. I just wanted to show the discrepancy between reality and what Malthus' calculation would suggest. That is very obvious. We have like a very large discrepancy, and I am not even talking about these are not even completely real numbers. I was just putting the amount of digits in this diagram, which is actually a mathematic method, because I checked with my math friends and they said that I would just have to put some other stuff in there to make it correct, and I decided to not do that because I hate mathematics, and I just did it the way I thought it was the most useful. But this illustrates that in 2000 years, human population grew in 1 digit. We have been at 300 million people 2000 years ago. We are now at around 7 billion. I also made another graph because drawing it was actually pretty funny. And in this graph, which I will also put over there hopefully, I just marked the amount, I marked every point where population should double if Malthus was right. So this is like reality in a graph, how in the last 500 years population developed, because maybe Malthus was like the spark that made his theory go right, maybe. So I have marked every 25 years where it should in theory double, and I have also marked, I marked it in red, and I have marked every occasion in green, and every moment in time in green where it actually doubled. So we have a comparison that not even if we are looking at the skyrocketing population growth in the last 200 years, not even then it is correct. So, something Malthus obviously failed to consider is that human beings are not machines. He failed to consider that general wealth and industrialization will influence it, and that population growth is not coming out of nowhere. He was also so focused on food supply that he didn't consider any other thing that might influence it, except like the preventive and positive checks, which basically mean genocide or other types of genocide, or just natural catastrophes that murder a lot of people, or war that also murders a lot of people. And additionally, he also had like a very narrow worldview. He was almost only focused on Europe, and I know he talked about other regions as well, but he did not thought about the idea that maybe in the future we will have virgin land to cultivate, as an example in South America or the US or Australia, where we have good land that has never been cultivated before, and that can increase food supply more drastically than he thought was possible. And also, like, there are a lot of new technologies in regards to food, and there are also new discoveries, stuff like that. And I mean, we can step back on for meat, and then we would also have like much more food for everyone. Furthermore, Malthus had the tendency to view people just as a mouse to feed, and not as someone who can actually participate in society and can improve stuff. He never thought that humans could, work, increase food supply by growing food, or I don't know, inventing technologies. Malthus also assumed that population growth had only something to do with birth rates and like the amount of children that survive, and not especially with death rates. Although in reality it is more about decreasing death rates. As an example, in Wales and England, the death rates decreased by 5.8% in last year. I think in 2020, that's last year. Even in a pandemic. It's something we have to like grasp. Even if in a pandemic, the death rates are still decreasing. And the birth rates are in many countries decreasing, or at least not pretty much increasing. If we're looking at Germany as an example, I think we even had like a negative population growth, like population was decreasing in last year, I think. So it is pretty much not just about birth. It is about just a lot of people living longer than expected, because the older cohorts with a lot of humans in it, still alive. So I would at least assume that if the baby boomer, as an example, will die, the population growth will slow down, especially in Western Europe, because then we will have the problem that we are not having enough children. We're just having a lot of old humans that we have to take care of. So I think it will probably settle down in a bunch of years. Also in countries like India and China, like especially in India, because many statistics have shown that with higher living standards, high income, the amount of children that their birth rates are decreasing, while the death rates are also decreasing. So they will have time where it's like pretty much skyrocketing. We are having it now, but as I said, it will probably settle in. At least that's what I can say about it after doing research. Another thing that Malthus didn't consider was contraception. I mean, I can take a pill that is like too small to show with my hands because it's too small, and then I won't get pregnant. My brother can use a piece of rubber to not get someone else pregnant. It is pretty easy. And someone could say that this only shows how preventive measures are working Although I would say that since it shows that the sex drive of humans, even though it's remaining constant, has not a high effect on population growth, it kind of shows us that the second thesis that Malthus is building his theory on is not right anymore. We are not having the same fertility rate. Fertility rates are getting heavily influenced, as an example, through contraception and through education. So if the thesis that he's basing his argument on is wrong, then we can basically just throw his theory out of the window. Additionally, as I've said, statistics have shown that population growth decreases when they have a higher living standards, but I wanted to touch on that for a second because this is partly because if more children are surviving due to better healthcare and less child mortality, you don't need backup children anymore, basically. And if you are having like higher living standards, higher living costs, higher costs for education, stuff like that, you have to choose basically between the quality of your children and the quantity. And I know this doesn't sound nice, I'm sorry, but you can choose between healthier, wealthier, better educated, more successful children, or you can choose between just having a lot of them. And I mean, we all would choose the better quality children because this also means that they have the chance to be healthy and successful in life. And we want healthy children. Something I've also noticed while reading his text is that he at least seemed to not think that food shortage, hunger and famines might stop people from, creating more people. As an example, during the Chinese famine in 1959 to 1961, the fertility rate was decreasing, birth rates decreased. And also in my country, in the first years of the Third Reich, birth rates increased, then came the war, and they decreased, and it took up until the 70s until they finally recovered. In case of the Chinese famine, they basically skyrocketed when people had enough food, but that only means that the measures are working. Well, actually it doesn't, because we're talking about fertility rates here, and Malthus assumes in his second thesis that those are constant. We are talking about the amount of women that are giving birth to children, and that, it has something to do with his second thesis. So, changes in fertility rates disprove his claim, basically. I mean, it is pretty obvious that humans make conscious and subconscious decisions concerning their reproductive life. Of course they will, and they will consider other influences. They will consider the amount of money they're having, the country that they will give birth to their children to, the healthcare system. They will consider if the chances that there will be another war in the next years are high or not. Another thing that Malthus thought that has been proven wrong in the last years is that he assumed that population growth will suppress wages. Although in the last years we had strong growth in population, and we also had an increase in high-income countries and a decrease in low-income countries. So, another point proven wrong. Yay! To close this part, we are quoting Malthus himself again. It is an acknowledged truth in philosophy that a just theory will always be confirmed by an experiment. So the experiment kind of failed. We are having a lot of statistics now that can prove that a lot of the things that he is saying and predicting did not happen like that. But we are still going to confront ourselves now with some counter-arguments that I've sometimes actually heard. But we're not doing it in a serious manner because some of them are really dumb. Well, you can't really apply it, but it scared the Europeans and thereby prevented catastrophes. So did Hitler. Hitler showed us that fascism was bad. Imagine if he hadn't shown us that fascism was bad. What would have happened if we hadn't had a huge warning about fascism back then? It's basically the same. Just because someone is warning someone else doesn't mean that the thing that they are suggesting in itself is good science. At least he inspired other authors, I guess. And that doesn't tell us much about theory as well. Look at Ben Shapiro. A lot of people are making videos about Ben Shapiro and disproving his claims, so he has inspired a lot of people. But is Ben Shapiro a good scientist? Or at least a good politician or a good debater? No, he isn't. He fucking isn't. He's lying and spreading false information, and just because people are talking about something doesn't mean that it's good. But India is doing Populationskontroll now, so it is working. Yeah, cool. But did you know that in the 19th century in England, Malthus was like actually a political figure and actively tried and actively stopped or helped stopping poverty aid laws? Because apparently giving people money so they don't starve is the reason why bread is so expensive. The free market will solve our problems. Our holy and glorious free market. You can't compare the time between 0 and 2500 because we are living in very peaceful times now. The last 200 years were very, very peaceful. Well, saying that the last 200 years were peaceful is a very, very, very brave argument to make. I mean, we had nuclear bombs thrown onto cities. We had genocide and more genocide and more genocide. I can think of 4 genocides right now in the last 200 years. That's a lot. The wars in the last 200 years were only so horrible because they had to kill so many people. Our population could increase because we didn't have that many wars, but the wars we're having were so bloody because they had to kill so many people. Yeah, I think we should also wonder if this is really the argument that we want to make here. I mean, is this really something you're supporting, that we just kill more people? Instead of just improving situations for everyone. I mean, that would be good, just a nice, peaceful planet, and we can all eat. Other pretty interesting argument, like one of the smartest people I know, my little social democrat brother, I'm still very, very sad about it, made is that we can't compare Malthus theory to reality because in reality we are already having preventive and positive checks. So we are already having like the genocide I talked about, and war, and famine, and poverty. We're not living in an ideal world where Malthus theory might be correct. We are living in a world where these checks are already implanted. So his calculation can't be right under any circumstance in this world because we are not looking at population growth if we would have left it unchecked, because it is already checked. Something interesting I noticed though while writing the script, doing the research, stuff like that, is that I was very biased. I mean, this is not a surprise, I think, but I really, really wanted him to be wrong. I did not look at the theory from the perspective of someone who was like, oh my god, I just want to check on your theory and maybe argue about it and compare the pro and contra arguments. I went into this video wanting to prove to myself and the few people watching it, I love you by the way, subscribe to my channel, that he was wrong. And this of course has influenced the way I am making this video. But I also decided against doing it, I think, more objectively. I mean, I basically just listed a lot of reasons why his theory is wrong, and I made joke about some reasons why it might be right. I mean, as someone who is interested in science and has like at least some expectations what this channel and this video is going to be like, I had to look at the reasons why I was so biased, at least if I wouldn't like completely work on my biases, because I will come back later why I'm not doing it here in this case. So I think it might have something to do with him saying a lot of things liberals are saying when they want to, I don't know, support poverty and want to explain we should let people starve to death, stuff like that. And this is something I don't like. I want to have a peaceful communist utopia. Listen to this quote, it will tell you a lot. But though the rich by unfair combinations contribute frequently to prolong a season of distress among the poor, yet no possible form of society could prevent the almost constant action of misery upon a great part of mankind, even in a state of inequality, and upon all, if all were equal. Basically, many people have to suffer, or all of us. And that is also something that a lot of people use to discredit communism. Back to Malthus. As an example, when we talk about his liberal agenda, he heavily influenced the Poor Law Amendment from 1834. And the goal of this amendment was basically to only let the completely hopeless get help and everyone else can kind of starve to death, because poverty is the individual's fault, and by helping people in need, we are actively encouraging them to be in need and to are close to death. So they really went being like, yeah, well, we have to punish poor people for being poor, instead of thinking, well, we should maybe help them and eat the rich. They also thought that by supporting them, that would increase immoral behavior, and that is also pretty dumb. He also opposed financial support for families because there were in certain regions, the wages depended on the amount of children the worker had to feed. So someone with 10 children would get more money than someone with 1 or with 0, which is pretty reasonable. But yeah, Malthus didn't like it. Because, it's their fault that they're having so many children, so they can just die. Oh, and of course, he also believed that the market should dictate wage levels without supplementation. Because, yeah, the free market is saving us all from capitalism. So yeah, even back in the good old days, liberals were assholes and just let people rather die than help them. They basically thought that the poor and the poor children were the reasons why poverty existed, and why blame the poor when you can blame the rich? But it's of course easier to blame the poor when you are the rich, or when you are related to the rich and friends with the rich, but you don't know any poor people, so it's harder to blame people you know for problems than to blame people you don't. Another thing that I found a problem with were the conclusions that are coming from his ideas. I am German, as you might have already noticed, because I mention it all the time, because I will always refer to German history at least once in a video. So, I'm German. So I grew up distancing myself and despising everything that even has a touch of fascism in it. Back when I was a kid, I of course didn't understood it, but if you are German and you are growing up in a fancy progressive household with such Democrats, you grow up hating fascism, you grow up learning about all the horrendous things that your ancestors have done. I've been to 5 concentration camps until I was 19, so until I was 18. I was 17 when I was in Auschwitz. And it was pretty rough, but it is giving you a sense of what can come from theories like Malthus. And before someone is saying, yeah, well, it's a bit far-fetched, don't you think? You can't just put Adolf Hitler and Malthus in, no, they're completely different. Let's listen to a quote by our Führer himself. The annual increase of population in Germany amounts to almost 900 souls. The difficulties of providing for the army of new citizens must grow from year to year and must finally lead to catastrophe, unless the ways and means are found which will forestall the danger of misery and hunger. Adolf Hitler continues by stating that artificial birth control sucks because it would interfere with natural selection. Instead, he suggests preventive checks that will make it possible for only the strongest people to survive. Natural disasters would be a challenge after all, and the survivors would prove worthy of carrying on the Aryan bloodline or whatever. He also said the following. But thus brutally acting against the individual and calling him back to himself momentarily, as soon as it is not able to cope with the storm of life, it prevents the race and species itself powerfully, and even raises it to the highest performances. He concludes that even though a lack of resources and measures against our population are inevitable, we should maybe start by, stealing other people's land and murdering them. Because if we won't do that, the inferior races will get more children and overpower us just by number. And of course, it is kind of cheap to dismiss an argument just because Hitler also agreed with it. Hitler also agreed that we should protect the nature and environment. Watch my next video, by the way. But I think in this case, it might actually be pretty based, because it is not just something like, okay, I'm a vegetarian, Hitler was a vegetarian too. But Hitler, these ideas that Malthus has and that got spread, probably because of Malthus, actually got implemented into German Third Reich politics. So Hitler has argued that we should take other people's land away, or otherwise inferior races will overcome the German people and Aryan race. Shit like that. This ended in Germans going to Poland and being like, no, we are taking your land now because we are superior and you're dumb, so you can just do cheap labor and we can do like the good folkish agricultural life. So Malthusian ideas really resulted in people dying, not just because they starved to death, but because German people murdered them because of reasons that had something to do with Malthusianism. So yeah, these ideas definitely have harmful implications, and by spreading and supporting them, we are at least legitimizing the ideas and the basic arguments, and I think this can lead to also legitimization of the harmful implication that these ideas bring with themselves. I mean, these are not just implications. He is basically saying that we should just let people die because we're too many and stuff like that. There is probably some true core in his theory. I mean, we can't just... I mean, just as every room is maybe too full at a party, the earth might get too full as well, and we will have to take measures against that. But this is not the case right now. There are definitely countries with an increasing population that can be harmful to the country itself. But I would argue that countries like Germany have large problems because we are not having enough people here. And to be honest, I think that if it wouldn't be a country like India with a population growth, but instead maybe like France or Finland or Sweden, it wouldn't be such a problem for many of our white conservative liberals, because then we would just be like, yeah, oh my god, the white race, we're loving it. They would, I don't know, be probably large programs to try to lure those people into other countries, so we are having workers, because as I've said, we need more workers in Germany. We need people to take care of all the old people we're having here. We have large sectors that are completely understaffed. And this is a problem that we are having now, because there are too many old people and we can't care for them all at the moment. I mean, it will only get worse in the future. So inviting new people to our land, giving them an apprenticeship, you know, they can maybe sign a contract that, yeah, well, I will work in Germany for the next 5 years, and afterwards I might stay. Maybe I found a wife or a man, or I don't know, someone to marry here. Maybe I have already children, or maybe I just go back to my homeland and I come with good education and bring this education to this country. I mean, that would be so awesome, wouldn't it be? We would all benefit from it. And I think the only reason why we are not doing it is because we are all kind of racist assholes. Moreover, I think we should really ask ourselves for which theories we want to play devil's advocate for. This is why this is not a non-biased objective video here. Because I cannot, under any circumstances, support the implications and the results that can come from Malthusian theory. And I want to ask everyone who went in the same thing like, yeah, well, Malthus might have some difficult points, but actually I like him. Do you really support what can come from a theory? Because I can't. I cannot under any circumstances. That's why I'm not doing it. Why I'm not being here giving you an objective overview about this theory. Because I think it is very dangerous to just present certain theories as legitimate ideas when their results can, as I've said in like short excursus to German history, can result in mass murder and enslavement. So this is my video. I hope you liked this video. I hope you learned something. I would be delighted to read your opinion in the comments. I mean, maybe you have like completely different opinion, especially to the last part, being like, okay, we should not just talk about theories without like criticizing them heavily if the implications are that dangerous. I'm looking forward to read your opinion. I would really appreciate a thumbs up, and you can subscribe, especially if you want to see my next video on ecofascism. It is probably going to be very similar in style to this video, so if you hate the style, you should not subscribe. But if you want to have more in this direction, especially with like some acting stuff in it, please subscribe and show me that you actually enjoy it and that it's actually worth the time that I'm spending here. Have a nice day. Be a nice human being. See you later.